Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. In response to COVID-19, all participants are required to wear a face mask. Those who cannot attend in person this evening are joining us via Zoom webinar, and we welcome everybody. And now I would like to invite you to join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And now I'm going to do a roll call to confirm attendees. Director Ginny Grunwald.
Here.
And I'll note Ginny is joining us remotely. Director Rob Perkins.
Here.
Director Julie Bocanegra.
Here.
Administrative Assistant Lori Stroll. Here. And I'm going to add our new interim superintendent, Mr. John Boyd, is with us tonight as well, and we're excited that he's here. And now I would like to turn things over to Director Perkins to read the land acknowledgement, if he would.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Evergreen Public Schools resides on the traditional lands of the Chinookan peoples and the Cowlitz tribe. They have lived on and cared for this land and its waterways since time immemorial. We thank them for their stewardship and make this acknowledgement to open a space of recognition, inclusion, and respect for all Indigenous students, families, and staff in our community.
Thanks, Rob. Okay, and now I open up for a motion to adopt tonight's agenda. Do I have a motion?
I move to adopt tonight's agenda as presented.
Do we have a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Jenny. Okay, it's adopted. And next up, it's special recognition, and I think I'm supposed to turn this over. Am I turning this over to John first? Oh, I'm so excited. We haven't had students come and play music for us in a while. This is really cool.
Thank you so much for coming.
My name's Corinne Ormson. It's been a while since I've been here too. It's great to be back though, really excited. We're here today to thank the board for your unwavering support through the pandemic, before the pandemic, of our performing arts programs. You show that in your board policies. You show up at concerts frequently. So we want to thank you for your support. As a special treat for School Board Appreciation, we have a student performance for you from the orchestra program at Mountain View. And Ruby is going to introduce the group and their piece.
Thank you.
Hello, we're from Mountain View, like Corinne said. We've been preparing this piece for the District Solo and Ensemble competition, and we practice after school, and we all really love being together. That's like pretty much the reason why we made the group. And we're gonna play a Dvorak Serenade in E major. We're gonna play a section of that. Thank you.
Thank you. My That was awesome. You guys are so amazing. I never, in all the years I've been on the board, I am never, I haven't taken for granted how fabulous the students in our district are in our music programs. I mean, it's always exceptional. I'm so proud of all of you. Such skill here, and I like the relationship that you guys obviously have. I really feel so grateful to the community that has supported these programs in our schools, because we couldn't do it without that support, and it just pays off, tenfold every single time. I can't wait to be in your school to see you guys play in the bigger concerts, and it's nice to be getting back to some of that kind of more normal performance time. So thank you so much for being here tonight. It's really heartwarming. Anybody else?
How long have you all been playing? I'm just curious. Did you start like 5th grade when you could do the? Oh. Yeah. Oh, just a little while, right? Yeah. Okay.
So you're all practically professionals.
Because if I, correct me if I'm wrong, but 5th grade is when we offer it, right, in elementary school, correct? Yeah, that's great. And I was just talking to a parent that said that their student was playing and loves it. They just decided to play and can't get enough of it. So I'm glad you all stuck with it, because that was beautiful.
Glad we have the orchestra program. It's much easier to play a violin with a mask, isn't it, than a trombone or something like that. I was a band kid at Mountain View. I graduated a long time ago. I'm really looking forward to the new facilities. Way Director Bradford mentioned. Not all that nostalgic for the old one now that I've seen what the new ones are. It's really nice. I hope there's an open house the students can go see just as soon as it's safe. It's just going to be great. Are any seniors or juniors in the group? Seniors or juniors? So maybe not. Sorry about that. But it's sure a joy to support these programs and to hear you play. It warmed my heart today. Thank you for coming and playing.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. I was closing my eyes and imagining I was in a concert at Benaroya Hall. It was phenomenal, excellent, and beautiful. Thank you so much for coming here and sharing your beautiful music with us.
Thanks for having us.
Anytime. This is why we're here, right here.
Well, good evening. As our wonderful musicians are heading out, I have a very fun and easy job that they gave me for my first job at the board meeting, and that's to recognize the board. It is Board Appreciation Month, and I don't know if most people realize and recognize that boards are volunteer positions, and our board members spend countless hundreds and hundreds of hours supporting students with policy decisions and responding to community concerns and just helping the district be as good as it can be. And I've had the opportunity to meet with each board member. Ms. Bocanegra will meet tomorrow, I think. We have a meeting. But in each and every case, I can tell you that unequivocally all of these board directors are focused on students. They're passionate about this district and this community, and they're working really hard to make this the best school district in the state of Washington. And so I have the job of reading a resolution, and I'll do that right now. So whereas the mission of the public school system is to assure that all students achieve at high levels and possess the knowledge and skills to be responsible members of a democratic society who enjoy productive and satisfying lives, and whereas Washington's 295 locally elected school boards and 9 elected educational service district boards are the core of public education governance system in our state, and whereas the districts and regions they lead serve more than 1 million students, have a combined annual budget over $15 billion, and employ approximately 120,000 people in the state. And whereas school directors play a crucial role in promoting student learning and achievement by creating a vision, establishing policies and budgets, and setting clear standards of accountability for all involved. And whereas school directors are directly accountable to the residents in their districts and regions, serving as a vital link between the members of the community and their schools. And whereas school directors and educational service districts provide a passionate voice of advocacy for public schools and the welfare of children. And whereas where it is appropriate to recognize school directors as outstanding volunteers and champions for public education. Now, therefore, I, Jay Inslee, Governor of the State of Washington, do hereby proclaim January 2022 as School Board Recognition Month. So I just want to thank you and congratulate you for all your hard work and dedication to the students in the Evergreen Public School System.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, John.
Do you have anything you want to add? Do you have anything you wanted to say?
No, fine.
Okay. Thank you so much. Okay. Next up on our agenda is board reorganization, and as people that follow us along know that every year we just make changes to who will be the board president and vice president and help facilitate our board meetings and the work of the board. And so I just wanted to say, as the outgoing board president, I really have felt honored to, work with this board and be a part of a group of people that really do care about kids. And we've had a challenging couple of years, as everyone knows, with COVID and all of that, and then, some recent things that have been going on. Everybody stepped up to be supportive as we've gone through these difficult times, and I really appreciate everybody stepping up and doing what we needed to have done. So that's my thanks to them. And so now we can now entertain a motion for the board president position. Do I hear a motion for that?
So if I could just say a couple things first. I just wanted to thank Victoria for the work over the past year. When she talks of not being first, because I was board chair, I think, in the beginning of the pandemic and leading meetings over Zoom and all the changes that were happening. It was not easy, but then just some of the things that we've had to, go through, and it continues. And, and everyone in this district has really picked up and worked diligently to make sure that our kids can be in the classroom every day, and I can't say how much I appreciate it. But I do appreciate the efforts of Victoria in leading us through some challenging times, especially over the last several months. So thank you for that. And with that said, I think that it's, Jenny has been in that vice president role under you for the last year and learning and developing, and I feel like it's time for her to move into that chair position. So I would nominate Jenny Gronwalt as board chair.
And do we have a second?
Yes, so I'll second that.
Thank you. Okay. Jenny,
I can hear you.
are you willing to accept the nomination?
I accept the nomination.
Okay. All right, then that
Thank
being
you.
said, all in favor of Jenny Gronwald being the new board president, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, I'm going to turn things, if you were here, I'd give you the gavel, but since you're not here, I'm going to turn things over to Jenny.
To me, to Julie?
No, first to Jenny.
Oh. Gotcha.
What was that? Are we okay?
So,
All right. So thank you, Victoria. As Julia said, I appreciate everything you've done as our president over the last year. You've been a strong leader for all of us, so I have big shoes to fill. So as my first order of business is we need to appoint a vice chair. So any nominations for vice chair?
I move that Julie Bocanegra be the vice president for this following year.
Second?
All right, we have a first and a second. All those in favor? Sorry, Julie, do you accept the nomination?
Yes, I do. It will be good to work with you, Jenny.
You as well. Thank you. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, and in order to alleviate any issues with me being on Zoom, I'm actually going to go ahead and turn the meeting over to Julie as the vice president to continue on. Thank you.
Thanks, Jenny.
Feel better.
Thanks.
All right, so the next thing that we would typically do is talk about who represents us as our legislative representative. Rob Perkins has been filling that role for how many years now, Rob? 3, 4,
5.
5?
Whenever it was that Michael retired. It's been my role every year.
And he also represents us and Region 6 at WASDA as our legislative representative. So we usually will pick a legislative representative to represent us through our efforts through WASDA and Olympia. So do we have a nomination to nominate a legislative representative?
I would like to nominate Rob. He's done such a great job, and he is our ledge rep at the regional level. So it would be my wish for him to do that if he so wishes himself.
Happy to accept.
I'll second.
All right. And Rob says he would accept the nomination?
Yes.
Good. All right. Then we have a first and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Great. Thank you, Rob. We appreciate your work in that area. As Victoria said, you've done a great job representing us and the work that you do through WASDA as well.
I think it's also worth recognizing that being a board chair in the last 2 years, chair, vice chair, that kind of leadership, that's the hardest 2 years in the last 100 years of public education to hold that role. And thank you for enduring what we endured. We did it together, and I appreciate that work.
Thank you.
And I think what Victoria said at the beginning of this, it takes all of us, right? All of the work that we've done, how we pull together through challenging times. Obviously, right now we're down a school board director because of Rachel's resignation a few weeks ago, and so we've got some work to do to fill that position. And typically, I think we would talk about some of our other committees at this time, like school foundation board and things, but maybe we want to get whole as a team and then maybe talk about some of those committee assignments that we've been working on, because each of us have been working on different areas, you know, some of the equity work and strategic planning. So maybe we just, after we get whole as a board, we talk about those things.
That makes sense.
Yes.
Okay. All right, we will move on to board consent agenda. Can we entertain a motion to approve the board consent agenda?
I move we adopt the consent agenda as presented.
Second?
We have a first and second. All in favor, say aye.
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 And then next would be our superintendent consent agenda. Again, we'll entertain a motion.
I move for approval of the superintendent's consent agenda as presented.
Second.
We have a first and second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Great. Thanks, Jenny.
Uh-huh. Thank you.
All right, we're going to move into monitoring district operations. First up is operational expectation policy OE0, which is our equity, second reading. And I think we're going to call on Rob to kind of give us a summary of the revision at this time.
Yes. Are we able to put it up on the screen, Lori? All right, let's wait for that. Got it on paper as well. It makes it a little easier not to crick my neck about it. What you're seeing looks to me like the unaltered text from our first reading 2 weeks ago. In the conversations I had with Julie, recognizing that the title of a policy is not the policy, we went back and forth about which number it should get and landed on 0, as in this is more important than the first operational expectation. This positions equity as the first operational expectation, and our passage today will position it for Superintendent Boyd to interpret it and to help us. I'm sure Clarissa already has most of this front-loaded for you, to help us understand the issues of equity in our system in terms of stories and numbers, so that we don't lose sight of where the systemic problems are or the personal problems. All that theory aside, I wonder if you perceive a need for me to read it out aloud, I'll do that, but the words are very familiar to me by now. Is it appropriate to just... So as presented, I recommend that we adopt this as our equity policy. Operational expectations 0 equity, out of second reading, and direct the superintendent to supply interpretation and indicators as put forth in our governance model.
Great, thanks, Rob. So at this time, we'll ask for questions from the audience, questions or comments from the audience regarding the equity operational expectation. All right, seeing none, I'll call for a motion.
I move the adoption of policy OE0 equity as presented today.
Second.
All right, so then we have a first and a second. I will open it up to the board for questions or comments.
I think for me, this is a milestone. This has been a cause close to my heart for a really long time. And, you know, all things kind of came together, and I'm really proud of the work that has happened in our district regarding this. There have been so many people that have come together to make this happen. Our equity team, led by Clarissa, you know, I just think they're doing just incredible work. Our students that have given input, staff, parents, community members. And I kind of like that it's 0 because it's like ground zero. And because this is just, you know, where we're at now. And what this looks like down the line will probably be different. The more we know, the more, you know, we'll want to visit this. It's a live, living policy, not this is the end all here. So I just appreciate everything everybody's done. I feel really so good about it, that we finally are having good, hard conversations and without fear. And that's what we need to do. Thank you.
Thanks, Victoria. Jenny, do you have any questions or comments?
Nope. I'm happy with where we've gotten with this. It's long overdue. So thank you, Rob, for all the work that you guys have done with the equity team.
I really appreciate the draft policy proposal that the equity team brought forward. Much of the language in their operational expectations is contained here, and it would be useful as a guidance because they've got some indicators already listed in that district policy proposal that would come forward. I want to also recognize, though, that Rachel Rogers, Director Rogers, who resigned last time, also contributed significant work. I wrote a draft off of a draft, and she and I polished it together with the input of the board and with others. And I like the language result. I like the intent. I think it's clear. It remains to be seen if it can't be interpreted. But we can work together and produce something that the public can see. So this is equity rather than some other definition. This is how we define it. So I appreciate all the input, and I'm glad we're at this point with this policy. Very glad.
I agree, and I want to also thank you, Rob, for putting the time in and working with the different groups to make sure that we had the absolute best language and policy and put forward, because we've looked at it, but that means that we have it right, because we've looked at it and brought it back to groups. We've got input from stakeholders, and that's where we want it to be. John, do you have any input or anything you wanted to add?
No, just congratulations. This is, like you say, a momentous occasion to actually have an equity policy, and I agree that it is ground zero and should be foundational to what we do. And I look forward to working with the staff here to execute and implement it.
Wonderful.
All right, so if there's no other comments, we'll now take a vote to accept the revisions for operational expectations OE0 equity as presented for approval. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Jenny?
Are you there?
Yes, I did. Aye.
Aye.
There she is. All right, it's approved as presented. Awesome. Thank you. All right, next up under monitoring district operations is operational expectation policy OE9, two-way communication with the public. This is a first reading, and from what we discussed at workshop, that this is a merge of operational expectation 3 and 9, and we're putting them together in one, which would be 9. The OE3 was titled Community Stakeholder Relationships, and OE9 was communicating with the public.
Yes.
We're merging the two together, and we've workshopped this last time. Rob, do you have a summary of this one? Or did I just give a summary?
You gave a summary. I have some misgivings that probably put me out of the appropriate voice for providing that summary. Is there?
Okay, so I think the reason why originally, because we've actually talked about this, I think this has been on our docket for the last couple of years. Gail Spoler presented last time on it, but she had been working on this, I think, for, I want to say it was 2 years. But as we were looking at our OEs and a couple of years ago and looking at the amount of things that were within them that we were monitoring, if I can recall, I believe this might have been something that I had brought up originally about combining the two because they were very similar, community stakeholder relationships and then communicating with the public, and then having them in one document and then being able to provide evidence that we're doing those all under one operational expectation. So I think that was the intent behind it, and so Gail did the work. She merged the two into one. I don't think that anything was really eliminated from either of the two operational expectations, and then this is where we are at now with the first reading, with the changes, with the two merged together. So basically, we took 9 and we merged 3 into 9.
I think it makes it easier for people for the public to be able to go to one place. They're not looking in multiple locations for information on communication with our stakeholders, and how we intend to handle our communication processes. So I like it that it's a little more compact and we don't have like duplication.
So I guess could I recommend that we accept this revisions? And then we'll open it up for questions and comments.
Should we have, and does anybody want to?
That's what I was going to ask for, questions or comments from the audience at this time on OE 3 merged with 9, communicating with the public. Clarissa? Hi.
Hi. So after it was presented on last time, myself, members of the equity team, as well as the director of the multilingual program for our district, added some suggestions here, and you see those in orange. And so it was really just to make sure that some of the language that was represented here matched what we had in the OE that was just approved. For example, there were some references to the word respect, which we had a lot of dialogue about in workshop. And so you'll see that that was replaced with dignity in one place, and then mindful in another. Again, it is in orange. And then there was this component of culturally and linguistically diverse and or culturally and linguistically accessible. When we're talking about ways of communicating with our community, we want to make sure that that is something that is highlighted. So just wanted to add that as a note as you are looking at it. We do have our feedback in there from a department perspective.
The only changes are the 3 words in orange that replaced the wording in the one that we have here.
The only other place where it is not orange, actually there's 2 places where it's not orange, but that's fine. In the first paragraph, where respectful has a line through, and dignity is there, that was an add-on from myself.
Okay.
As well as in item, I think it's 2, where you see culturally and linguistically accessible, that was also an add-on from suggestions from the equity department.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm waiting for the motion.
Okay. Anyone else in the audience that has any questions or comments about this operational expectation? Oh, I guess there's some. I think ma'am in the back, did you have a question on this with your hand up? No? Oh, okay. Marty, did you want to come up? You have to come up to the microphone so everyone can hear you.
Hi there, everyone. I just wanted to comment on the fact that everything this board has done regarding this has been objective, straightforward, with zero politics. And if you look at what's going on around the country, all those things are what's happening, and they're not getting anything accomplished. But here, we are getting things accomplished and doing things the way they should be done, being totally objective. That's all I want to say.
Thanks, Marty. Hi, Bill.
Hi. Mine's just a little wordsmithing thing. Is it supposed to be engages or engage? I think it's supposed to be engage.
Where are you at? Which?
That's very first sentence. Because if the superintendent's the subject, I read a lot of 5th grade papers. That's the only thing I know.
So your suggestion is in
Engage instead of engages.
oh, okay, no S.
I think so. Putting it before the board.
Well, I'm going to leave that one to Rob's hands. What?
Indeed.
Is
Is it S or no S?
Well,
We're our English teachers.
the superintendent shall assure the public is adequately informed about the condition and direction of the district as well as, yeah, that's a sentence that needs a bit of smithing. Bill is right. It's
no S.
It's kind of a run-on. I'd send it through some copy editing.
Well, I think that we're getting some expertise in the room to help us out.
It sounds kind of like passive versus an active, whereas engage would be the active verb that we are engaging. Like, so I agree with Bill. I think because then it's the action, it's the active of engage, whereas engage seems more passive. So in that sentence, engage is active.
We don't want this to be passive.
No.
It's a serious business here.
Yeah.
Thank- So take off the yes then, do you think?
I would rewrite the whole paragraph and give it a different structure if I were doing that.
Because if you would say the superintendent assures the public is adequately informed, that would be the active versus the passive, which shall assure as passive. So it depends on just what that voice is.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the audience? Oh, come on up.
Hi, my name's Gary Wilson. I wasn't planning on commenting here. I'm going to comment later. But I think we all can agree equality is really important and everybody should be equal. But it seems like, I just want to remind you, per your OSPI's website, less than half of ESD students met standards for English, 49.7%, math, 39.3%, and science, 40.6%. Those numbers are roughly 10% below Washington state averages, which are basically pretty pathetic, but we're 10% below pathetic.
Is that pertaining to this policy right now?
Well, I'm just
Comment?
saying the more time and energy you spend in schools focusing on these things and not math, English, and science, you're not going to bring these numbers up. So,
Okay,
thank you.
thank you.
Okay.
All right, any other questions or comments from the audience regarding this operational expectation? If there are no other, then I will ask for a motion.
I move to bring this operational expectation on two-way communication with the public to move forward for a second reading.
All right, do we have a first, do we have a second?
Second.
Oh, Jenny seconds that. Okay, so now we'll go ahead and open it up to the board to, for questions and comments.
So this is going to take a minute. I wasn't as prepared as I wanted to be in the workshop last time to talk about my concerns with this action. And in the meantime, happenstance actually surfaced the packet from the early bird session in 2016 where the Aspen group came and presented the model for coherent governance to us. And so I got a chance to read through that and remind myself a little of the purpose of all of this and so forth. And I thought about why we write operational expectations policies and the division of labor involved there. When we did our workshops to author these policies in the first place, Operational Expectation 3, what was the title of that one?
Community stakeholder relationship.
Community stakeholder relationship, contains language. I had the documents in the board docs today. Don't include, give me a moment, please. Contains language about protecting confidential information and effectively handling complaints that have been proposed to be struck out altogether. Some of the items were moved to OE9 in the proposal, but another sentence that was struck is reasonably maintain an organizational culture that reasonably includes people in decisions that affect them. So these are.
Do you have any of that so that we can see it? Did it come to the board, the rest of us, so that we would know what?
Let me see what I can do. This would be the original policy as proposed for elimination. And if you switch to my screen,
I'm talking about what he's talking about, that we've got the current one, but are we,
I think, Rob, are you saying that like in OE3, that number 1 did not get moved over to the new expectation?
No. If it did, it's a little too oblique for a plain reading, in my view. The context of OE3 was not public relations. It was the relationship between a patron or a student or a voter with individuals in the school district, administrators, teachers, principals. And what I remember is that the idea of maintaining an organizational culture that engages parents and citizens includes the engagement that comes through the online resources, okay? Protecting confidential information dovetails with the curriculum choices we make because we buy online curriculum and all of them have data use and data sharing agreements connected to them. And so everybody in the system has to make sure that FERPA is being followed and so on and so forth. There's the line about effectively handling complaints, and I don't remember Mike's reasoning for removing that line. But when I looked at the interpretation indicators in the report that we have for OE3, it also included things like a list of all of the public records requests that asked for student data and what they did about it, and a big old spreadsheet of the software involved in like every program that we have to pay attention to in order to do the budget correctly. So there's a lot of detail supporting the narrative report that Dr. Steach was giving for this policy. There was also, he also made an interpretation in foster partnerships and community stakeholders and organizations that advance the district's mission and purpose, which produced a list for us of all of the community linkages with different organizations and so forth that everybody in senior cabinet had. So we knew who would be at whichever thing. It's like the Mental Health Foundation, Faith Partners, you know, the list goes on, and it's extensive for a district our size. But the fear that I have is that by repealing OE3, we lose the context of requiring the superintendent to build that culture where a parent or a student approaches the system and encounters an empathetic person who helps. We need to see reports about that.
So you don't think that because we moved number 4 over to 9, in exactly the way it's written, so is that, if we monitor that within 9?
We did. If you look at the proposal, the sentence reads, "The superintendent shall ensure the public is adequately informed," which is a one-way communication model. So by keeping the two-way, person-to-person operational expectation, Superintendent Boyd has this opportunity to point to a specific policy as he directs the organization on how they interact with the public, not just the communications department. So there's a whole system kind of thing to me. OE9 was a communications department kind of thing. So community relations had these two pieces. They had the public relations piece, how do we put that? Where the institution is speaking to everybody through information campaigns, social media campaigns, managing the optics and phrasing of the official messages and the letters and so forth, and the website resources used as a promotional tool. And that's great. We want that. But the people-to-people thing would be the parent to principal, teacher, admin, the administration to the organizations in the community, teacher and bargaining unit expectations for the level of trust that we want built between the district and those units, and the website as an information resource. I think we lose the context of OE3 by merging the policies. Now, some of the counter arguments that we heard 2 years ago about this said we should merge the policies and align them with the departments, which is something I actually fundamentally disagree with, because that seems to me to be a structure that encourages the siloing that we're trying to eliminate. All students access all of the system. My kids accessed everything from special education through highly capable and into CTE, just pieces of everything. And so I don't think of that alignment as actually wise. The public isn't looking at the system from the system's lens. It's looking at the system from their family's lens or from their students' lens. And then just finally, none of this language was authored by any board member. None of these changes were proposed initially by any board member, as far as I know. And that's actually in our governance model outside of the division of labor for these policies. The superintendent has a responsibility to interpret them and suggest changes, but not to insist on or author changes unless we commission it. I don't know that we did. I don't recall that. If I'm wrong, I'm happy to be wrong, but the other reasons are actually more primary to me, is that we need to keep an operational expectation of how the people in the system interact with individuals when they approach the system, right? And we need the strong and effective public relations piece of it. So I'm opposed to this change for those reasons. Probably the largest one, though, is the language change that takes out an annual progress report that includes data indicating student progress towards the results policies. That explicit link to the results policies is what makes it clear to people why this is connected to student achievement and results and eventually their graduation and their step into their next life. Without that language, I don't perceive enough clarity in the annual report to change the annual report into a report about student success. Because I don't think that's what it is right now. I think it's beautiful. It says many good things, but the clearer we are and the more we support that with clearly presented data, the better our public image will become. Well, that's a theory of action, and that's why my vote is a no on this. Well, of course, acknowledging and promising that if I'm in the minority, I will support the decision of the board.
Do you have a recommendation that you would prefer to see?
I recommend we retain OE3 and OE9 and give John Boyd time to interpret it, and then have him advise us on whether or not he thinks I'm right, or he thinks there's an advantage to keeping them separate or combining them. I'd like to hear his expertise as a career administrator. Yeah.
Do you have some concrete kind of language that you'd like to see in these two documents, or you like them like the old way they were?
I prefer the existing OE3 and OE9 in part because we have interpretation and some data on OE3 that he can examine. We have nothing on OE9, which was never interpreted. And it would, it's important to me that we see the existing policy and that we let the new guy process that. And from there, make a proposal. But I'm still just kind of opposed to combining those two contexts into one thing. I think something gets lost.
Do you see any way to combine the two and add something back into them? So something, because I feel like some of the points that you made about protecting confidential information and on the student results part, like those were embedded in other operational expectations. And I think that was part of, like there was some duplication all the way around on some of that.
There was. That's, the duplication of data presented in each of the operational expectation reports was clear when they began working on it. And that's work we can do, but again, how a parent or a student sees the system and has questions about this or that subject sort of separates from the institutional silos or departments, no more silos, right? Departments that we have and into, you get a report that a member of the public can understand without having to understand the system. And that's the sense that I drew from sort of the cross-channeling of data and other indicators, is that we get sort of, by keeping that, we get a natural breaking down of those interdepartmental silos. We know they exist. Everybody means well, but they exist. And this could be one way to help resolve that and enhance communication department to department as well. So that's the thoughts that I had about it.
So, okay, because this is the first, I'm hearing of this theory of thought, so.
I had to get my thoughts in order.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Yeah.
So I guess the thing for me, I want to make sure that how we communicate with our stakeholders facilitates improvement in student achievement, and that people know how to come to us, and we know how to go to them to get the information that we need, to get the input we need, to give them the information they need to help have their student be successful. I mean, it is about student achievement. And that's why we wanted to have this type of policies or policy, either one, so that as we're looking at data, as we're talking about what needs to happen for our kids, that the community and parents and students all feel connected to help with that work and be able to, and that we are giving accurate information to make change. So I don't have a strong position one way or the other. I'm feeling a little vague about why we need 2 versus 1. I just want to make sure we have what we need so that we can move forward, because as we go forward with our strategic planning process and we're dealing with data and we're dealing with, and even our equity work and all of that, we need to be able to have good communication systems in place so that everybody understands what's going on, and we hear from our families and we hear from the community about the work, and that we're in this together and not a us versus them kind of thing. That, for me, that's kind of where my head is on all of this. How we get there, I don't know if it's in the superintendent's interpretation and obviously the monitoring piece.
I was going to ask John if he had a chance to take a look at these and if.
Honestly, I just had a cursory look at them, so I haven't looked at them in depth or in detail and don't have the historical perspective on them.
I'm happy to catch you up. This first couple weeks on the job, and it's not a context that he'd have.
So for me, when I take a look at this, because this started a long time ago, and I think it was one of the things that Gail was trying to finish before she left, and so she presented it to us at the last meeting. The merging of the two had made, because I think, I'm the one that brought it up in the beginning, that it made sense because they were very similar in their titles. And as long as we had all of the information in one of the policies, if we merge them, or if we have the other information within our other operational expectations, that we would be covered. And so I guess that might be the question that we might want to take a look at before we move forward with merging them or keeping them separate and as they are. It was just, we were trying to not duplicate efforts by having things within different operational expectations and putting that burden on staff to come up with all of these measuring components. But we want to make sure the right information is out there. So, Jenny, do you have any thoughts that you wanted to add? I don't want to forget about you over there.
No, I'm here. No, I don't have any. Sorry.
Okay. I mean, I guess I would be willing on maybe tabling it until John has a chance to take a look at it and put some thoughts behind it, and making sure that the components of it, the ones that are handling complaints, protecting confidential information, are somewhere in the other ones. And that we're not just putting it here because it's duplicating another operational expectation.
I am in support of that, yeah.
Okay.
That's fine with me.
Yeah. Well, should we choose a date or?
What's our next board meeting date?
I think it's what, the second week?
Second Tuesday in February.
Is it the 8th? Yeah.
So I could move to postpone action on this for you until the 8th of February at our regular board meeting.
Do we need to make a motion for that?
That's the motion.
Second.
All right, we have a first and second to bring this back on the 8th of February. All in favor, say aye.
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 In the meantime, you'll connect with John.
I'd like to do that.
Can we get stuff, though, ahead of time so that we all have a chance to review whatever ahead of time so that when we come back together, we can move this forward? Because we're coming up with our strategic plan. We're going to be dealing with a lot of input from the public, and I want to make sure that our communication processes are
Indeed.
ready to go with our strategic planning process.
One of my concerns and aspirations for the strategic plan is that either it aligns with the language in our expectations and results policies, or we get an opportunity to modify the language in our expectations and results policies to be a closer match to what they've developed for the strategic plan. That's not tail wagging the dog to me. It's just adjusting dialect, because the clearer we make it,
And
the
the
more
str-
peaceful it's going to be. Yeah.
And the strategic plan process does have that ability for that alignment. It needs to be in alignment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that'll happen, but we still have to move forward with our public and get their input so that we're all, yeah. So, thank you.
Okay, good. Good discussion. All right. We're going to move on to a teaching and learning update. I'm going to call up Julie Tumulty, and I just want to remind the audience that face coverings need to be worn at all times during the meeting.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. I'm here tonight to talk about the dyslexia law and our implementation of the law this year. We have had a committee for the last year and a half interpreting the law and figuring out how best to get that going. I want to recognize the committee members. They have created a system and processes for our school that have really will affect our students and have produced really good results across the system. So I just want to first say, we had Amy Peterson, who's an elementary academic interventionist, Amy Fredericks, an elementary academic interventionist, Kristen Curtis, elementary literacy TOSA, Leanne Strickler, elementary literacy specialist, Lois Hinckley, academic interventionist and Title I LAP literacy coach, Ruth Beggs, our school improvement specialist, Karen Fox, director of federal programs, Tilly Meyer, director of teaching and learning, Matt Hill, senior director of special services, Scott Monroe, senior director of teaching and learning, Bobby Height, senior director of teaching and learning, Aaron Lusich, executive director of teaching and learning, and myself. So this was a big undertaking. You can tell by that committee that there was a lot of minds put around this. So this year is the first year that the law was implemented, and we started this fall. So I just want to go over a few things about what we had to do. So districts must screen in kindergarten through second grade for indications of or areas associated with dyslexia. We are not diagnosing dyslexia, so we want to just be really clear on that. We're just risk factors for dyslexia, and then interventions are planned for that. We had to use approved screening tools. Luckily, one of those was iReady, which we already had, and so working with iReady, they produce a secondary report based off our fall scores that we can sift through that data and pull up risk factors. And then our kindergarten and first grade students also had to be administered the rapid automatized naming by January of 2020, which we did this month and we did in November. So there's some legal definitions of dyslexia. You have the PowerPoint. We can scroll through that. But what we were screening, so iReady screened 3 things: phonemic awareness, phonological awareness, letter sound knowledge, and then the Gander ran, which is the company we ended up buying the test for, was the rapid automatized naming. And that was really that if children who struggle on that, reading perform more slowly on those tests. So that was one of the indicators. So this, again, just tells you a little bit more about RAN. That was in the Gander company. That was one of the companies that they had suggested to use, and which we bought that test. This is our flow chart. So this is the process that school teams went through to determine interventions for students. So if you look through that, and it's long, I apologize, but all of our students, 1st and 2nd graders, take iReady in the fall. From that diagnostic, we pulled reports, and this is where the team came really in handy. Ruth Beggs was amazing. She created reports that took students' scores and then was able to put them into spreadsheets so that we could decipher who had risk factors. From there, we then tested students, and with the Gander ran, there was a lot of information based on a student's birth date. So there was a lot of calculations that went into this, and school teams got information to them right in November for that first round of testing. So as you can see through the flow chart, again, the students were considered at risk or not. We were not diagnosing any dyslexia other than factors. So this tells you a little bit more about the Gander ran. This was more information than I had known before because I was not an elementary literacy specialist, but it's pretty interesting how they do this. The tests didn't take very long. They pulled kids out. It was about 3 days of instruction. Our literary interventionists pulled students throughout the day, and we were able to do it throughout school without much of a impact to the classroom. This is something that you'll see that it would look like. So students have to know the name of the objects in the picture. So 2, 6, 9, 4, 7, or blue, red, yellow, green. And they would name it like that. And they just go across quickly. So just to know a little bit more about the RAN, it's one of the strongest predictors of later reading difficulties. Its possible weaknesses can be identified in kindergarten, in which kindergarten we don't give the iReady till January, and that is not as specific. We don't get great iReady results in kindergarten, so the RAN is actually a better predictor. And some more. So we communicated this with families. We let them know that what we were doing and why. Again, that does not mean a student is diagnosed with dyslexia. It doesn't mean that the student will ever develop dyslexia or that they have a learning disability. But what it does mean is that we see some patterns of students that need help and intervention. And so it was really important to us that through school conversations that the parents saw and heard what this meant, and that we were not diagnosing, but this was identifying risk factors. It was interesting. A lot of the data showed when we pulled it that a lot of the students were already getting interventions. They were already flagged by teachers of needing additional interventions. We talked about other reasons why students may have low scores other than possible risk factors for dyslexia, just so that parents, again, could have different, it's not necessarily just dyslexia. One of the parts we struggled with a little bit was testing our multilingual learners or our English language learners. OSPI recommends using the WIDA for this, and for identifying who should be screened. And then the WIDA, we are not using the WIDA because this is a new test until March. So our English language learners that took the test in the fall, we did not identify them to take the RAN. According to the state, we need the WIDA scores, which then put them into a category to decide to take the RAN or not. So there's additional guidance about how we meet that or not, but we keep an eye on those students. there's a lot with the RAN of knowing the names quickly of those colors. And if you don't know the names, you can't say the colors or the numbers. So that's an area that we have been communicating with a lot with OSPI back and forth about what to do, how to do it, since the WIDA, again, isn't until the spring. And then there's a ton of links. I think you don't have to click through them, but there's a lot of information coming out. We're really trying to educate people on, we're looking and finding more ways to identify needs of students early. And there's, again, a bunch of links on there. There's, on your page, there's also that's not where I wanted to, sorry, clicked out. These, I would say, the team did a really great job in working with the instructional coaches, the team of teachers, because each team of teachers at each school, team of teachers, an instructional coach, a literacy interventionist, had to work together to sift through this data. And coming up and working on something new in the midst of, thank you, perfect, in the midst of a pandemic was a lot. And so I'm really proud of that team that created the system, and the system that they created, we will keep using. It worked really well. And the data sheets that we used and how we pulled students. And so interventions with those students and the next step of that, of how we treat and help the students, is coming up in the next month or two. So that's it. Questions?
So we've been using this method with the students already, or?
So interventions for students, we finished the identification of students this month. So Kinders finished the RAN this month. So starting in February, the intervention teams at each school will identify what intervention students need that were identified.
Okay.
I have a couple things, Julie. Thank you for the work. I mean, that was quite the team, and I appreciate that. One of the things that, and I know enough to be dangerous when it comes to dyslexia, but one of the things that I'm concerned about, what I hear from parents, is that because we don't diagnose, but the process to get a student diagnosed is so complicated and so expensive that I get worried that families that don't have the means to hire these diagnostic experts, how do we ever get how do we get them diagnosed? So I don't know the answer. I'm just saying that's a worry I have. The other thing that I've been hearing about has to do with our reading curriculum, and that the reading curriculum we have, we all love, but apparently it's not a good reading curriculum for children with dyslexia. It kind of goes against the kind of processes that you need to teach a dyslexic child to read versus someone who doesn't have dyslexia. So that's a concern that I'm hoping we're looking into and addressing. So.
Yeah, I don't know if I can address that specifically, but what we're doing, just to let you know, so Amy Peterson, who is one of our main leaders of this, there is and I probably also know enough to be dangerous on there. I taught math, remember? Orton Gillingham is the method that we use to teach then the dyslexic behaviors, or how to reach the students. So all of our academic interventionists, we're going to have someone at each school who is trained in that. So we just are signing a contract to be able to do that through our LAP program. We have many teachers and instructional coaches already, maybe some SPED specialists that have been trained in those specific methods. So a lot of it is pushing into the classroom for, here is that specific method that you need to learn this number sound, or this letter sound, I should say. So again, Amy can describe that really well, of here are the little pieces that do that, so that we can push into the classroom and get those skills on their way. But it's not necessarily the same as a diagnosis and plan from there. It's the risk factors that we target.
So I would be curious, and I don't need an answer today because this is coming from left field, I know. But I would be very curious, because until we can really have a hard and fast diagnosis of a student, what would need to be in place for us to be able to help families get that diagnosis? I don't know if this, and that's, I know, a big conversation. It's probably its own special something, grants, resources, hiring our own experts that can do it. I don't know what it is. But I am concerned that if we never get the actual diagnosis and we're only operating off risk factors, which is all we have to work off at this point, due to nobody's fault, but kind of the bigger system that that we have to work with. So that would be a conversation that we might want to have later on, is what could we do to offer our families some kind of assistance so that we can get the diagnosis for our kids that have, those risk factors that seem pretty glaring, and get them actually diagnosed.
Can I comment real quick?
Yeah.
Or I guess just questions. So as a parent of a child that is dyslexic, I think it's kind of like ADHD diagnosis. It's not something that we actually do within our schools, but I think that we provide services to assist them. I was extremely excited when I heard that we were getting this requirement and having to actually do the screening. So that is a huge step. One of my biggest concerns was that our FNP, or our Fontenay and Pinnell reading curriculum, did not help with our dyslexic children. Because it's fundamentals. It's how they fundamentally learn how to read, and it doesn't, that is ultimately, what they need, and they're not getting it from a mainstream reading program. So the fact that we are looking at ONG and actually signing contracts, that's the first I've heard of that. So ONG, or they're one of the number one programs, dyslexic programs. And I actually was almost going to train myself because they do have trainings where they train people how to do that, to help my daughter, because there wasn't a lot of assistance. So I think having the services is huge, because it's more along the lines of getting them on track with their reading, I think, more, or just identifying that they need the assistance and getting them the proper programs, because just giving them reading interventions doesn't really do it for dyslexic kids. So I appreciate the extra work that we're putting in to actually not just identify, but also help and get them through. Now I just hope that we, maybe come up with something for our older kids that are kind of going through that. Thank you. Thank you guys for all the work you've done on that.
Thanks, Jenny.
Oh, I don't mean for this to sound glib, because I mean it very sincerely, but there is a font called Open Dyslexic, which apparently helps reading, because the letters don't have the symmetry that plays with the minds when they're seeing that, and their own creativity rotates the letters and makes it impossible to read as clearly and as quickly. But I'm looking here at a claim by the American Psychiatric Association about dyslexia as a prevalence of 20% of the population, which kind of suggests to me, screen everybody, which I think this is what's happening, but also this high comorbidity with other neurodevelopmental disorders like ADHD, probably high functioning Asperger type autism spectrum disorder, and so forth. That just kind of makes me wonder if the tests that we're administering work in earlier childhood, because you want to find these conditions as they're preschoolers and kind of getting tutored on their letters and so forth. If they're identified that early, then all kinds of services can appear for them, right? But if you could talk about your understanding or your staff's understanding about that part of it, it's I guess sort of a wish, that the awareness of this kind of friction for a fifth of all students could be something the entire system recognizes so that a teacher in the normal course of the day goes, oh, that's a characteristic of X, Y, Z. What would it take to get there?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think one thing that we need to or could do is just some more communication around what we're doing, even know that it's the K-1-2 screener. Like Jenny said, what do we do for the older kids? So even just some communication out about this piece of information, some key data points could be really good.
Data-driven.
I mean, when you think of how many kids this impacts, and having these tools and new ways of thinking about this, that could be a game changer as it pertains to our kids' literacy skills and the frustration. I have a number of friends that are dyslexic, and hearing their frustration and I just can't even imagine, as someone who loves to read so much, I just can't imagine what it would be like not to be able to just breeze through a book. And so to give that gift to a student.
And that's part of why I'm thankful that starts at K, even though we're using multiple measures at K, but that rapid automatized naming is really like key for that part, because that's just a huge piece of it. So we can get it at least as early as kindergarten, mid-kindergarten, but before those reading skills go. And I am really excited that we can get the training to have at least one person trained in each building on that specialty curriculum.
Yeah. Oh, that's great.
Yeah, I wonder if that information is useful for other neurodevelopmental conditions, and thinking as broadly as possible is interesting to me about that.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, appreciate the work. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. That was a good report.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
All right, next up, we're going to call up Clarissa Hightower, who's going to give us an equity and inclusion update.
All right, good evening again. So the past two times that I presented an update to you, first was Susan Hong, who presented to you her SAFE presentation, so Students Advocating for Equity. The following meeting was Jamie Johnston, who was talking with you about HIB response and prevention in his building. So I'm just going to give you an update on those two things, and then I'll continue. So the first thing is when Susan spoke with you, I think she had about 8 students who had signed up for SAFE. So I'm pleased to let you know that by the time she closed, signed up for her committee, there were 70 students who had signed up to join. She did have her first meeting, and out of the 70, only 20 showed up. However, several students commented on the reasons why they couldn't and were going to be present at the next one. So she's very excited about that and is already planning for meeting number 2. With the HIB prevention and response curriculum or professional development that our team put together for our secondary schools, since that presentation, we've had 2 additional schools in the secondary who have asked to have that professional development brought to their school as well. And as a result of that, we're also now working on an elementary version of what is being provided for our high school students so that our administrators can opt into that as well in their buildings. And we'll have that ready for them very soon. We're also gearing up for Black History Month, which is coming up in February. And that is multifaceted. But one of the things that I want to address is that as a part of that, all of the Heritage Months that we are presenting and honoring and celebrating, our team is putting together resources to make sure that our teachers have access to that, meaning they have creative ways in which to have those celebrations with their students. And we always map that back to our Ready for Rigor framework that we talked to you about earlier in the year via our Culturally Responsive Practices presentation. And so everything has a through line. And we're being very consistent in what we are sharing with our buildings because we know they have lots of things going on. We also have social emotional learning team as a part of the equity department. And they are working on, among other things, one of their big projects is the comprehensive counseling plan. That is a mandate for this year. So they are coming to a close on what that would look like and putting a recommendation together for that. So we'll have a more in-depth update for you on that once we get it finally approved. But I do want to put that on your radar. They're also working on restorative practices modules that all of our leaders will have access to. We just provided professional development optionally for any teacher who is considering facilitating a student affinity group in their building. That facilitation is something that teachers have a lot of passion around, but would like to gather some skill sets. And so we provided an optional professional development for those teachers. We have our next Equity Advisory Committee meeting coming up on February 10th. In our last meeting, Susan came with a couple of members of her planning committee for SAFE, and we gave her feedback on what she would present to the participants in the first meeting. And that was the first half of the meeting. The second half, our subgroups went into their respective breakout rooms to continue their work. And so now that we have the student subgroup on its way with SAFE, our next subgroup that we will be helping implement their goals is our parent subgroup. And they are working on increasing the knowledge of parent involvement and engagement opportunities in their child's school. So that's their goal. And those are all the updates that I have for you this evening. Any questions?
Oh, sounds
Like
good.
what's going on?
I know.
Going on. Never a dull moment. Oh, you know what? I do have something. At some point, I left you a phone message, and then I became a moving target after that.
Okay.
So, to get a hold of me, but in light of what happened in Camas, and then a situation that came up with one of our teams this last weekend. At some point, we need to have a conversation, I think, about what if our students, well, both were perpetrators of anything, or were on the receiving end, what can they do? What should happen at a game to stop the action? And I don't know, I have no clue what that looks like. I just know that we can't expect our kids to be at a game playing and then have something happening that is not okay. And I don't want to give it too much traction because I don't know all the facts yet. So, but that's something I would like us to kind of be thinking about a little bit. Does that make sense in my vague
It totally does. And please rest assured that we are. And not only are we thinking about it here, but the same way we collaborated with surrounding districts around past items, we're doing the same for this one. So that anything we do is a concerted effort. And it won't be something that we're out there because we play each other, right? So that is something that we have to have in alignment. We are thinking about that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we can talk about it some more later.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Clarissa.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, next up, matters reserved for board action. This is the 2022-2023 school calendar. It's the second reading. I'm going to call up Janae Gomes to lead us through this. Hi, Janae.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
As explained in workshop and then during first reading, we worked with our surrounding districts in order to align our spring break, winter break, and with EEA's collaboration as well and support. And then we notified our other union groups around the calendar that we are presenting, and we haven't had any comments or feedback since workshop or first reading. Do you you have any questions about any of it.
The EEA has a negotiating role with the calendar. Do the other groups have the same kind of opportunity, or
Just to
is it a
notify
difference?
them,
Just to unify them?
to notify.
Notify. Okay, I understand. No, my only other comment is I can't believe this is the academic year when my youngest son is a senior.
All right, I guess we will ask for questions or comments from the audience about the 2022-23 calendar as presented. If there's any questions or comments concerning this. All right, seeing none, I'll ask for a motion from the board.
I move adoption of the 2022-2023 school calendar as has been presented to us here.
Second?
All right, it's been moved and seconded, and then we'll open it up for questions or comments from the board. I don't have any.
Looks pretty straightforward.
I don't have any.
Nothing.
All right.
Looks good.
All right, thank you. Then we will take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Perfect. Approved. All right, next up, good news report. I believe Craig is here to deliver the good news.
Hello.
Hello.
I get to share some great stuff. I'll start with some of the great work that our students and our school communities did before winter break. Mountain View High School does this every year. They get a lot of help from the Finley family who donate a ton of food, big items like turkeys, but they also collect at the school at Mountain View, and then the leadership group hands out these holiday meals that will feed 10 people, each one of the meals they hand out. And this year, again, they donated over 100 meals to families. So it was awesome to see them all working together and handing out that food. And then I hope you get a chance to watch this video. I got to share this with John during the sit down with the soup. Fircrest Elementary School has a wonderful tradition where their entire school community collects food, students, teachers, the PTO, and then they box it all together. And it's also, they also have some bathroom items and things like that that families might need over the winter break. And they put them all together. And what's really cool is the tradition, another part of the tradition is that the fifth graders, they're the ones that actually every day after the collections come in, they go to the different classrooms and pick it up, and then they sort it all out. And at Fircrest, you know, they have the sunken media center, and it's all lined up around the library. And to watch these fifth graders run around and get so excited at what's donated, and not because, as their FCRC coordinator said in the piece, they're not excited because they like something. They're excited that someone else is going to get something that they like. They've served up to 70 families at once this year. I think they did 50 to 60 just because they had less families that had signed up. That was really great. I wanted to share a new program this year. You guys are aware that we put in middle school soccer thanks to levy dollars and the support of our community. And the boys started in the fall, and in January, the girls started. And this was a game last Thursday that I was very happy that it didn't rain. The sun was out. And watching these young ladies take to the field in their first year. These games are really exciting and competitive, and it's great to see families come out and watch this. And of course, this was a program that the district asked families what they would like, and this is something that they really wanted, and so it's great to see it come to fruition. Another cool thing that happened, I don't know what I just hit. I will do that.
Beg your pardon.
Excuse me. It was great. At Burton, they had a wonderful event showing. I didn't touch anything that time. They had a wonderful event bringing a past Burton student with current Burton students, and that's Cole Hansen. He recently graduated from the Marine Boot Camp, and while he was there, Burton students had sent him letters of encouragement, and after he graduated, he came back to the school to thank those students, and he handed out Marine pencils, but mostly he let them ask questions, and they asked some great questions, and he did an amazing job interacting with them. And another special thing about this visit is that in that picture you see, that's his brother who's in 4th grade, and that's his mother, Amy, who works at the school. So it just shows how tight the Burton community is. So that was really cool to see. Some other things we wanted to get to was some staff recognition. The person that has given this report for the last 10 years, Gail Spoler, recently retired on Friday, and I will miss her, and many of us will. But we had this wonderful moment. Scott Eppinger, our Senior Director of Facilities, had the idea to clap her out like they do at elementary school. He's the former principal at Furcrest. So members of the ASC staff all stood around the staircase, and at 4 o'clock we made her leave. And when she did, everyone clapped her out. And if you watch the video, she got very emotional. So I think it was a wonderful way to send Gail off. I told her we would honor her today, but I told her, do not tune into the board meeting. You just retired. Take some time with your husband. So, of course, last week we honored Holly, so we included that in the good news. And I want to end with this amazing news. We have wonderful community partners that support us, and one of them is Zoom Info and their CEO, Henry Schuck. That organization has, over the last few years, through their employees and also through the CEO and his family, have raised money for the community, and they supported our FCRCs through our foundation. And last year they did over $400,000, and this year they raised over $2 million as a company, and they're going to they're giving us $1 million to support our FCRCs. So it's just an amazing thing, and if that's not good news, then I don't know what good news is. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thank
Craig.
you, Craig.
It's so nice to see our students being involved as community members and to learn about service. And then I love seeing the young man that came back from, his military school and stuff, and to honor him for his service. So those are important things for our kids to know.
All right.
And I am missing my daughter's soccer game right now. She's the 6th grade Frontier girls are out in Camas playing them under the lights right now. So I appreciate our middle school soccer programs.
I hope she wins.
Glad they're there, yeah.
That's fun. All right, I'm going to call up our Chief Financial Officer, Jennifer Jacobson, up to give us a budget update. Oh, it's fine. Well, I can make it a little bit bigger. I think it's fine.
Thank you. Good evening to the board, and I want to say a special welcome to our Superintendent Boyd. We're very excited to have you here now. Anyway, excuse me. And I just got to go see my daughter play at Pacific last week and middle school soccer, and it was, they didn't win, but it was still a lot of fun. They had a great time. So
sounds like soccer's a hit.
Yeah. It was great. So anyway, I'm going to present the 2021 financial statements, so the annual report. These were wrapped up in November, and since we typically only have one board meeting in December, it kind of gets pushed into January. These are the financial statements that will be audited in February, so in the accountability audit with the state. So anyway. Okay. She said the up and down arrow, but here we go. All right. I always start off talking about enrollment because we know enrollment drives almost all of our sources of funding. It drives our staffing, our budget, so it's a very important factor as we're going into looking at our financial statements. I put up a 6-year enrollment of, this is our full-time equivalent students. It's everything from, includes Running Start and special ed and all of the different categorical programs. You can see in the first 3 years, we hovered around that 26,000 FTE. We had a decrease in the next 2 years of about 400 FTE. And then in 2021, the pandemic hit. We went into the remote learning, and unfortunately, we dropped by almost 1,400 students. So that did have a significant impact on our funding. So first of all, just an overview. I thought it's interesting to look at the 3-year historical revenue and expenditures and see kind of where our fund balance has been. 18-19 was the last kind of full year we had pre-pandemic. We ended the year in a little bit of a deficit at $23 million. In 1920 was when the pandemic hit in March of 20, and so we sent students home. We did have some cost savings from closing the buildings down, but we were still fully funded on those FTE through March. So we also had access to ESSER funds in 1920, and we had about $1 million in claims in ESSER funds for 1920. So we were able to kind of shore up our fund balance. We knew going into 2021 we would see a pretty big financial impact from the pandemic. So we were able to end the year with $28 million in fund balance. And then in 2021, we added a little bit, mostly break-even year. Our revenues, we were able to use ESSER funds to supplement what we lost due to the enrollment decline. And I'll go into more detail on that in the next slides. And then we also had additional expenditures due to pandemic with things like PPE and enhanced cleaning and that. As far as our reserve, out of that almost $29 million, we have 4 restricted accounts. So these are legally restricted. They're generated from these programs, from the FTE, and they have to be kept within those programs. So we had CTE, LAP, Skills Center, and food service restrictions from that fund balance. And then we have a non-spendable inventory and prepaid expenditure account. That's kind of an accounting, it's not a restriction, it's more of a committed bucket of money, and then the committed to minimum fund balance. So those last two together, we were able to meet our 5% minimum fund balance required. All right, out of our $373 million in general fund revenue, we had 61% for state, so that's where our apportionment and our levy equalization dollars come in. Our local support was mostly operations and tech levy. We didn't collect a lot of fees last year with students not in schools. That made up about 12%. Our state special purpose includes special ed, LAP, bilingual, and transportation. And then federal special purpose are our title, food service, and that's where our ESSER funds show up. So I thought it kind of helped to look at, over the 3 years, what happened to these revenue sources. You can see in local support, we had a little increase, and that's due to we started collecting the tech levy funds in now. So that's helped in our local support. In our state general purpose, it went down to 61% last year, and that is because of the impact on our apportionment funding. By dropping the almost 1,400 students, it had a net impact of over $8 million on our apportionment funding. We also had a levy equalization drop by $4 million. So those two things made a pretty significant drop in our state general purpose funds. Our state special purpose also had a decrease. I wanted to just talk for a second about transportation funding, because that's the other place we saw a significant impact from the pandemic. Transportation was budgeted to bring in $16 million in revenue. Once, I don't know if you're familiar with the STARS funding formula that they use to generate what our funding will be. It's based on a regression analysis on ridership. And during the pandemic, we primarily transported food, supplies, and small groups of students. So we didn't have the ridership to produce the funding. So according to the STARS formula, instead of getting that $16 million that we had budgeted, it was coming up with $6 million. So we were looking last year at a $10 million hit to our transportation funding Fortunately, the legislature came in and helped us out, and they helped mitigate that impact by passing a stabilization bill where we received an extra $5 million to help shore up transportation. So, we still didn't get our full 16, but we got 11 million, thanks to the legislature. And then our federal special purpose, we showed 9%, and that captures the ESSER funds we used to fill in the funding gaps that we experienced because of the enrollment drop. So general fund expenditures, I just explained what the different areas of expenditures are, 49% in basic ed, 14% in special ed, our CTE and Skills Center was 7%, and then our compensatory programs include LAP, Title, Highly Capable, and Transitional Bilingual. And then our federal stimulus dollars were the ESSER 1, 2, and 3. We only actually claimed ESSER 1 and 2 last year, and that made up 3% of our expenditures. And then district-wide support, this includes transportation, food services, it includes all of our custodial costs, as well as some of the ASC costs like payroll and accounting and HR and that. And then lastly was capital leases. So on the expenditure side, you can see, I mentioned that, or maybe I didn't mention, but some of our categoricals like special ed and CTE, those FTE numbers stayed relatively flat over that 1 year. We didn't see the drop in those numbers. So we still received the same funding for those categorical programs, but where we were hit hard was in our basic ed. That's where the large drop was, primarily K through 5 in basic ed. So we had 49% expenditures this year, and we were able to use those federal stimulus money to help supplement the loss that we had in our basic ed money. And then the other piece was the district-wide support went down to 14% of our overall expenditures, and that was primarily because we did have less transportation and food service expense because the district wasn't open full-time that year. The reason capital and leases went up is that we had to go and get more devices to help during remote learning. So the summary of the fiscal year, I put in the unprecedented word. I know that people are getting tired of that, but I know a lot of us have worked in education for a long time, and we've never seen the impact that we are seeing right now due to the pandemic, whether it's fiscal or educational or, in so many ways. Our enrollment decline of nearly 1,400 students did cause a large net decrease in our funding. We also had that decrease in our local effort assistance. I also mentioned that emergency transportation stabilization bill came in and helped fund $5 million to help us offset our transportation funding loss. And then lastly, we had ESSER funds of about $12 million that helped backfill some of those losses. I also want to mention our other funds. We don't talk a lot about these. Capital Projects Fund, I believe you get a quarterly update, so you know what's been going through on our Capital Projects Fund. We did have, in November of 2020, we had a $275 million bond issue, so that helped stabilize that fund as we get through the end of our projects. Debt service fund just is how we pay for those bonds. The Asb Fund had a bit of a hit last year because we didn't have the same gate receipts and the same Asb card sales that we typically do, yet the students still wanted to have their yearbooks and do those types of things. So hopefully that is just a one-year thing. We typically try to coach them to break even when they're planning their budgets. And then the Transportation Vehicle Fund, we spent about $1.4 million. I believe that was about 17 buses were purchased with those funds for last year. And that's all I have. Do you have any questions?
Just trying to do some quick math in my...
It's a lot of information.
372 million plus 258 million out of the Capital Projects Fund in expenditures is over $500 million
Yeah.
of community support and state support for education. That is a big deal. And we're seeing the fruits of it. Thank you. I just, that loose comment right there is just like, wow, that's a lot of money going towards these services. And I know it supports a lot of just hope building and teaching and learning, and I like that. Thank you for the clarity of this slide presentation. It really centers me. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Well done.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Thank you. Yes.
All right, next up is board comments by the school board. Anybody have anything they want to share?
I think we have received apparently a number of applications for our vacant board position, so that's encouraging. And we'll be talking during the workshop. 12? Okay, great. So that's good. And that's exciting that we have people who, are anxious to serve in this capacity. And so during our workshop, we'll be going over, we need to coordinate some dates for doing the interviews and reviewing the applicants and that. So that's going to be exciting. So that's.
Is it the submission deadline that's February 12th? That's a Saturday.
31st.
31st of January. So the deadline to submit the form that you sent out to interested parties is the 31st of January. And then our meeting is, well, it's 2 weeks from now, right? The 8th for screening. Okay. Yes, I just.
Any comments, Rob, or? All right, we're going to go ahead and get started back up. Jenny, who's online with us, is going to start with the students on governing boards, policy number 1250. This is a workshop item. Jenny, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. So this is the Student on Governing Boards Procedure 1250. This was brought to us in our retreat over the summer, but since it's been so long since we've reviewed it, we're going to go ahead and do another review. I'm not sure how we want to proceed with this. Do we want to go... Sorry, so we've got the policy number 1250 up on the screen. It is the boilerplate language basically that we received from WASDA for the policy. So I don't know, do you guys want me to read through everything, or do we want to just kind of, has everybody had an opportunity to review the policy and procedures? I know that the policy.
Yeah, I read both of them, and I just have questions about them in general, but nothing about really the wording of either one of them.
Okay. Do we want to just do that? Just open it up for questions or comments or changes that anybody may have? Or what does everybody else think?
I think that would work. Victoria, Rob?
Yeah. Like you, I read it today, and it looks like the plan that we discussed, so.
Well, I had a question.
Okay. So,
Can you hear me, Jenny?
Yes, I can.
Okay, it says a board will annually seat 2 student representatives, but I thought we were doing it as 2 from each high school.
It says 2 high school student representatives, a junior and a senior from each high school will serve as liaison to the board of directors. It's number 2.
I think she's
procedure.
referencing the policy is different.
I'm at the governing.
The policy needs an insertion just from each high school in the right place. And
Yeah, okay. That's,
Okay.
all right. I'm just
They'll
looking at
match
the
up.
policy.
Okay. Yes, sorry. That one, I'll get additional wording in to mirror the actual procedure.
Okay.
Then my question then would be around that, because then it talks about they're expected to attend all meetings. And I didn't know if we were going to have the 2, I don't remember exactly how we were going to do that, if they were going to rotate the 2 for board meetings, or if they were going to choose their own.
So the original or the plan that we have discussed is that the group will pick someone that will present to us, and everybody is invited, but at least 1 or 2 people will be in attendance at each of our meetings. I mean, at our general meeting. Is that what it is? It's not our general meeting. It's our
school board meeting.
Regular meeting.
Yeah.
Regular meeting. Thank you.
And so then they'll do like it'll be on the agenda where the student reps will give us their updates.
Yeah, like a presentation, kind of just a brief presentation of hot topics, something they want to bring forth, kind of like we do with equity in teaching and learning.
Okay, so then my next question goes back to the procedure. Once we have them all in place, and then 2 of them will come to a board meeting to present to us, how often are they going to meet? And then are 2 of us going to meet with that group, or somebody from district staff?
So that is still, we're talking about it being one of us, and then the rest of it is kind of, because this is new, this was more just putting the initial just general procedures in place. And then once the group is put together, kind of having, kind of working out all of the minute details with the group so that they feel like they can own and they're not just being pushed into doing stuff. So depending on how that turns out, it would be one of the school board directors, and then we haven't really talked about if there's going to be anybody else involved. We've talked about the application process and who will be involved in that, but we haven't actually talked about the committee, just with the it was supposed to be Rachel and I, and that were on the governing or the student and governing boards group. But we'll need to talk about that more.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
I do kind of think we need to have district person be part of that.
I agree.
You know,
It's just more of
from
a like
administrative kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Coordinating their meetings, giving them assistance where needed, that kind of stuff. Who that would be, I don't know.
Right.
It's for greater minds than mine.
Yeah, I made a note of that too to discuss.
I think my questions got answered. Other than the ones that we have outstanding, like more when it rolls out.
Yeah, this is more just the board policy on it in us getting them started. And then once we do, it's kind of, this is going to be kind of different than other school boards have modeled, just because we have so many high schools and we don't want to leave anybody out. So we want to make sure that we have representation from each of our high schools. So this will be a larger group than most boards have. Usually boards only have 1 or 2 student reps. So this will be a little different. And I had kind of just wanted the students to kind of plan and make kind of their procedures together, so that as you know, as a school board, we don't always know exactly how the students will work best. So having their input on some of these things is, I felt, a better way to go. Sorry, I can't actually see you guys. So if you're talking and I can't hear you, I don't know. I'm looking at the policy.
We're not talking.
Okay. I'm like, I don't know what's going on over there. So
I'm reading through the procedure a second time here.
Okay. The policy I will fine tune. That was kind of pulled together quick. I did a quick review of it and then just submitted it out to you guys. So I will do a deeper dive in that and get more of the language that mirrors the procedure.
Are we still thinking that we'll start like applications this spring?
Yeah, so the intention was, it keeps getting pushed back. It was going to be, the beginning of the school year. Then it was over the holiday break. So now we're almost into the spring and are getting close. So I would like to get this up and running. The original intention this year was to get juniors on board. That would then transfer into the senior position next year, and then we would only have to worry about getting juniors for next year. However, we are kind of running out of time, and the whole process itself and getting the applications is probably about 3 to 4 weeks. And then coordinating that with a school board meeting. I haven't done an updated timeline since we came back from holiday break, but I can do that. But I hope to have them in place before the end of the school year and have a lot of the details worked out so that we're ready to hit the ground running once the school year begins, as well as hopefully adding in a retreat for them over the summer.
I'm wondering if we shouldn't think about having in the spring that we select a sophomore and a junior that will be a junior and a senior this next school year. And that way each school will have their 2 representatives. And
we're going to have to do it that way. We're not going to be able to stagger it because we're kind of running out of time. So I don't want to overwhelm staff in the schools by putting out an application. And then after we get that done, less than a month later, putting out another application. So I'd rather just put the application out for a call for juniors and sophomores for next year.
And that way, whoever is the sophomore this spring that's going to be the junior in the fall, they'll be on for a 2-year term, where the one that's going to be a senior will be on just for the 1-year term.
That makes sense.
Okay, so it's a half credit each semester, which would give them, I guess, 2 elective credits.
Wouldn't it be,
before their graduation.
2 if you're in for 2 years,
They
right?
go in for 2 years, yeah. And it looks really good, Jenny. It's reflective of the student feedback we got last year, and practical, but still kind of audaciously large. I'm looking forward to this.
I know at first it'll probably be like herding cats, but so are we. So, as Lori knows.
It's going to be a lot that, the first year, especially getting everybody kind of organized, and for us to kind of get on, a schedule with them and getting familiar with everything. But my biggest thing with doing the student representatives is that I want each and every student that is on there to have a voice if they so wish to. So that's a lot of why I didn't put a lot of details into our procedure, because I don't want to limit them on what they want to do once they are all together. And we can refine this as needed.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we'll need to do, like come summer, maybe one of our retreat items is going to be maybe some things that if we have any, like a special interest project that we have that we really want to get student input on, to kind of get things kicked off, and then they'll start developing things as they're more used to the position, but to kind of give them a practice project that's still important one.
I feel like the first year we're all just going to be feeling our way through this and seeing how the dynamic builds. I think there was a lot of wisdom in the WASDA Early Bird that we all attended, listening to those students talk, and the way that Aaron Jones kind of liberated us all. He says, "You're all 12."
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can listen to each other, and they just spoke their minds. We've seen that in the Breakfast with the Board meetings, and you open a space for this, they will walk into it and speak their minds, and that is going to be so revelatory.
I know. And the good news is I think our strategic planning processes, we're reaching out and we'll be involving students in that process, so we'll be able to give ourselves a plug for them to apply and to be part of this bigger.
Just beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm good with it all. I think we just have to iron out some of those logistics once the students start applying. And
is there any comments or changes or anything from the floor? Because I know a lot of the staff that's there tonight was there at the retreat, and I'm just wanting to see if they, like Clarissa and Julie and them, have had a chance to review this and see if there was anything missed.
Bill Bevel had his hand up.
Is there anything that has been done specifically to accommodate the legacy students? I did notice the 3-period requirement, and I don't know, I guess it just depends how you count the periods, because if they're doing some of them online, as long as that qualifies, but I just wouldn't want anyone at legacy to be excluded because of that.
I think this plan has always included students at Legacy.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yeah, this actually includes all of our comprehensive high schools plus Legacy and Henrietta Lacks. So we will have 2 representatives from all of them. That was actually a big conversation we had at the retreat, was how we were going to stack this, in it, so that it was equal, across the board.
She can't see Julie.
Okay. The one comment I had was about the dress appropriately for board meetings, and thinking about how we provide equity in that, of what's appropriate and what's not, and not having to create any barriers for students to what that might mean.
So would you suggest just leaving that out?
Yeah, I mean, I think in general.
Just however kids dress for school is how they dress, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Julie. I actually think that was something that came up over the summer, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem.
So I would be fine with striking that.
Okay.
Agreed.
Oh,
Hi,
I,
it's Christy Peak. Hi, Jenny.
Hi, Christy. Hi.
I love this idea. This is kind of in general about the tone of some of the requirements. One of the things was the dress appropriately. I'm wondering if you really want to hear from kids from all levels and all levels of engagement, I guess I'll say, in high school. You probably won't get a lot of kids who aren't engaged applying for this. But if you did, I wonder about the academic standing, the letter from the principal, things like that, I think also could be barriers to some kids that you might actually want to hear from.
thanks, Christy.
Yeah, because we've been pretty clear that we don't want just the leadership kids. We want to hear from kids across the board, every which way, sideways, backwards.
I wonder if the 6 principals were intentional about inviting students into the space. I know a couple of them would.
Counselors.
Yeah, or counselors, yeah. I know at least at 2 or 3 of the schools, they're very intentional about seeing all the students. And if we find a way to cultivate that.
My only
That'll be-
concern and not the letters, that can definitely be adjusted, but the academic standing, my only concern with removing some of those requirements is that we then, like our sports teams are required to keep certain academic standings in order for them to participate. So I don't want it to come back and be, well, how come they don't have to when they're doing this, but they do when they're doing this? So I think that's kind of just why that was left in there, just because and we can have a conversation about it. I just definitely want to make sure that we're not.
What is the academic threshold for student athletics?
2.0.
So,
I was just going to comment about that. Like, I think with sports, there are requirements that are daily. We have daily sports activities. They travel for activity games. So the entry into this, or the ask, isn't as heavy as those. We don't have academic standings for most clubs unless it's an academic club. So anything else that doesn't take all that time, which is why sports have it, right? That students need to be able to keep up that athletic schedule of daily practices and games in the athletic standing. If this is twice a month and then a few meetings here and there, I don't think it has that same criteria of academic standing. I think Christy makes a good point that we have to talk about this in a way to get a variety of groups of students. Like, how are we going to want different groups of students? And the leadership students have one perspective. We want lots of perspectives. Yes. So what does that mean? That doesn't mean students may not have those grades or they may not be participating. It's just you want to see all of those. Maybe there's a lot of good reasons why that student has a grade point average that we want to hear from.
Thank you, Julie.
I think there are lots of good reasons why we'd want to hear those stories and have that representation and that voice in this room. Does the, I haven't found it yet, Jenny, but does the process or the description include, I guess, a description about how much they can participate in the board meetings? Because when we get to board discussion, the students talking about what they think of a policy and development or what have you, that's important. And it's something I'd hope to see as we go over the policies. It really will lend some depth to it, I think.
Well, I mean, they'll be available. So like I said, if there's anything that we want them to kind of help with, and then they can report on it, or then we will have, 1 to 2 representatives in attendance. Obviously, the meeting will be open to all of them, but we, just warrant you, and we can tell them this is on the topic, and we'd love your input on it.
So they can prepare in advance.
Yeah, I would hate to kind of just throw something at them and they're not
Oh, of course
prepared
not.
unless they're I mean, they're always welcome to participate, but if we want something like that, I would want to kind of prepare them for it.
I think what I'm thinking about is having the space between I move and second when the board is discussing, that they're in that space. They're allowed to talk on the motion, if you will.
I think it would be just like any time when we ask for like questions from the audience, then we would ask questions or comments from them, and then it would probably be right in between the two groups.
See what they say.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because they're gonna have a self-organizing role, the first 12, and I have to be responsive
Yeah, and
to
that's
that
kind of
part.
why I didn't get into the details on this, on certain aspects, because it's fluid and it really will depend on the group.
Yeah.
What are you thinking, John?
Well, love the idea of student voice, and I think we need to listen to our students more. So really applaud the board for, putting together a plan like this to do just that. We've had on my previous board, my current board, soon to be previous board, we do have student reps, and they've really added value to the conversations that we've had. The challenge has been that many of the students that have signed up over the years have also been students that have been very involved. So getting them to sit through a formal board meeting for 3 hours on a Thursday night when they have homework and athletics, to be able to weigh in the ways that you want can be challenging, and getting students to routinely show up so that they understand the procedures and the pieces to the board. But I think there are some ways that this can be done very successfully with some thought and with some careful planning. Having a couple of representatives come to the board meeting, go to the retreats, and go to maybe the WASDA conference, or some really great leadership activities for those folks. And then being thoughtful about how that leadership group functions on a quarterly basis or monthly basis, or however long however frequently you want to meet. But I will tell you, and it will require a significant effort to, you said herding cats, to really thoughtfully organize, coordinate students for authentic feedback. Is important work. It can be done. It just requires a lot of effort and time to do so.
I'm sure Clarissa can give us some tips.
Come on.
That's okay.
Reading the last sentence of what successful board service is. So what does that definition mean if we're giving credit for this? Since it was kind of commented, I think John hit on it, is it showing up to the meetings? Is it participating in what? We have to have some measurement if we're giving the credit for that.
That and who awards the pass, because you have to have a certain person giving the grade, don't you?
Right. You have to have a teacher of record, I think.
Right.
What's that?
Don't we have to have a teacher of record?
We would have to have a teacher of record, yes. And we'd have to have one at each school since they're in different entities. But we could do that depending on where leadership class or a leadership credit, and then work with those teachers to be the teacher of credit. But that would also be additional work for those teachers that we would have to coordinate with and compensate.
Okay.
So more
making all these
details.
notes.
Yeah, more details to iron out. But
Yes.
At this point, we just have to get the policy and the procedure, and then we can iron out some of the logistics.
Yeah, and I'd be absolutely happy to help flesh it out with staff and with the board to figure out a way to find a really good way to get student feedback in the way that you want to help. And I do think you, Victoria, mentioned that the strategic planning process is always an opportunity to, if we can blend the two in a way that doesn't create, more convenings, and we can get, regular and ongoing feedback related to that from our students too, in some way, shape, or form. But I think there's lots of ways that you can do this. And I did hear from Jenny and appreciate the fact that she wants students to have some agency around how this works too. So it will evolve, and I think that's fine.
Won't be student voice unless the students have their voice. It's even in the organization. So.
Exactly.
Yep.
All right, so are we ready to then are we going to make some updates, Jenny, to this, and then bring it back for first reading? Are we at that point?
We're that far in the policy wording with that one change, in my opinion. And that's,
yeah, I mean, maybe some of the requirements, the letter recommendations and things like that. I think maybe those will be there'll be some changes with that. But other than that, I think the overall meat of the policy is ready to go. Unless
and then
there's other
eliminate
changes.
the dress appropriately, right?
Right.
That one, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I'll strike some of that out and bring it back for first reading.
And
we
then
can
maybe the
review.
academic requirement too. I don't know how everybody feels about that.
Yeah, no, I liked what Julie said about it, and that it is true that they travel a lot and they do a lot more, that they have to keep their grades up. So I understand that. That makes sense.
and the procedure itself isn't something that we have to go through a two-hearing adoption at all. Once the policy's in place, we take the existing procedure, and then John would be modifying it as we go.
Yep.
So we could have this passed by the end of February.
That'd be nice.
All right, so Jenny will make those changes, and then we'll bring it back and.
Pass this thing.
All right.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thanks for working on that.
So glad I finally got it in front of everybody.
All right, legislative updates. Rob, do you have something for us tonight?
Pretty much only the upcoming events that you and I are going to be participating in, and a broader report after we talk to the legislators. There is, I think, the predicted motion on the enrollment stabilization bill. We weren't able to get Evergreen stories or Director Area 6 stories in time for the hearing, but I'll bet they're the same as any other district in the entire state, because we're all just kind of in the same boat there. It would be nice, I think, John, to have a little bit more linkage with Melissa Gomboski. And I can, talk about the wonky
I
details.
actually met with her today, and we just spent a half hour, but it was more of an introduction. And we did talk about enrollment stabilization and the need to, I expressed the need to really push forward on that and hard. And I do believe that Jennifer has had an opportunity to testify and share the story with the group a little bit. But yeah, there's a.
So the bullet list
That's
that
an
you had in the
important
email. Is she here? There you are. The bullet list matched your testimony? Oh. Okay, yeah. So.
Thank you for clarifying.
Very good. So, yeah, it's a 60-day session. So it's going at Formula One speeds, as usual. And, it's interesting that the bus funding formula work that Representative Stonier and some others were doing to try and modify that STARS formula. It doesn't seem to have motion in this moment, but it might still, because no bill is dead until the end of the session, and even then, sometimes not. So we just got to keep an eye on things and take opportunities to advocate when we can.
Are there going to be any like surprises that we weren't expecting that you've been hearing?
There was a bill discussed last week in one of the meetings, or 2 weeks ago in one of the meetings, about highly capable, extending a universal testing mandate, or screening rather, not a testing, to all second graders or all first graders. And so there's discussion that went back and forth in the committee about how would we be able to supply an estimate of the costing for that kind of assessment load, and what would that mean when you have 10%, like I think it was Federal Way talked about, they have 10% in their highly capable program, their equivalent of Excel, and the funding is 5% or 3%. It's half or less what it should be in order to provide the enhancements and the special services that those kids need. So, like us, they do a lot out of their levy. And the bill proposed maybe an uptick to 7 or 8%, which is okay, I guess, but
It's going to be like special ed.
yeah, if the 3% increase is wiped out by the cost of the assessments,
Yeah.
it's a thing, so.
But it is an equity issue.
Mhm.
We know that certain groups are underrepresented.
Mhm.
And so that is an issue that has to be dealt with, for sure.
Yeah,
Oh, Julie, she's just full of information tonight. Well,
So
aren't we?
If they give us funding, then we would be golden, right? Yeah.
Thanks, that's good information.
Thank you.
That's like when we were like the first ones to do all-day K.
I knew the screening
finally
had
funded it.
changed from COGAT and Iowa Basic Skills to something much more accurate, I guess, for finding the highly capable. Yeah, well, but there's something that replaced the skills test with something, I guess, more age appropriate, is the sense that I had. I don't know, my kids, they took those tests and basically just had nausea and anxiety throughout the whole thing. And it can be pretty stressful, but if it's just a normal course of the second grade, maybe that's better. So there's discussion about that. There's a discussion about a bill to mandate that the ceremonial parts of board meetings, not the workshops, be archived in audio form for 5 years. There's a bill floated for that. It's like, well, we already do that, but I was asked to provide an estimate costing because I know how much the computers cost and stuff, and gave him a complete answer, and we just have to see. But none of those things sound like something that would impact our operations at all. It would just be a mandate elsewhere. And that's just kind of the way it's going right now, is that the opportunities to advocate come up, and they're gone before I can, build a case, but others in the state have stepped up with similar stories to advocate in the right way. I remain pretty confident that the WASDA positions that were passed and the priority orders are the same as ours. So, makes it pretty easy to align.
I would agree with that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an awful lot of time for nothing to report, huh?
Anything
Sorry.
from you, John, on legislative? Okay. All right, let's move into board planning. Is this centered around like timeframes and things for our,
Yes, we need to, and I'm actually going to ask Lori to be involved in this because she's keeping us on our schedule. And so we do need to have Our next board meeting is when we will review the applicants in executive session to determine who we want to interview. And we will all get those, because it closes at the end of the month, and then Lori will make sure we all get the copies of each of the applicants so we have time to review them. And
Do we review those in executive session or in open? I can't remember.
I thought it was executive session.
For the applications?
We can review the applications in executive session is what I understand, but when we do the interviews, those
has
have
to be in
Yeah,
public.
the interviews are in public, yeah. The interviews are in public. Yeah, okay. It's been a while, but yeah.
So next meeting.
It's been since Rachel was appointed. Yeah, I thought that that's what it was.
Okay, so next meeting, we're going to have executive session to review the applications.
Yeah.
And then we'll pick a date, basically, to do the interviews. Okay.
So the date to do the interviews is what Lori needs to have. Okay.
There's a school improvement on the Tuesday, unless
Are we having that?
we defer that the way we did the last one because of the workload.
What dates are we looking at? I'm sorry. What dates are we looking at? I can't hear Lori.
Oh.
The week of the 14th.
Thank you.
So are we still doing, still doing the February 15th school improvement plan presentations, or are we shifting all of them back?
I believe we made the decision to shift them to March, didn't we? What was the?
We actually made the decision just for the first one, and then there was going to be discussion with the board whether we could go ahead and push those back because there was so much going on.
My just knowing what's going on in the schools right now, my suggestion would be, and I think the principals would really appreciate moving those into.
I know, they've got a lot.
Well, then let's
So could,
do that. And then
yeah, since we're already blocked out for it, we've all got ourselves scheduled for that date. Let's do it on the 15th.
So we don't have a SIP on the 15th?
Right, they're going to it's getting moved back into March.
Okay. I can't hear Lori, so I don't know what she said.
We'll keep telling you.
Okay. Or I'll just get an invite.
Yeah, that's what I count on.
So what I was saying is that if we went ahead and did the SIPs the interviews on the 15th, I want to make sure that you're comfortable with potentially late April doing like a Tuesday, Thursday SIP, and then we'd have a meeting, and then the following week we'd have to do a Tuesday, Thursday again in order to get that done with graduation and everything else coming. Would that
Makes
work
sense.
for the board? Okay.
Think so.
I'll work on dates.
We just
for
have
that.
to, because they need help. I mean, they're overwhelmed, and the least we can do is let them buy some time.
Okay, is that all we needed to decide on that
I
for
think so, yes.
tonight?
So our board meeting in April is on the 19th. So if we did the 26th and the 28th, and potentially, could we do May 3rd and May 5th?
Wednesday, Friday?
I was-
Oh, no,
I'm
that's
sorry.
August, sorry.
No,
I'm just looking at the wrong.
it's Tuesday, the
I'm
3rd.
looking at the wrong month.
May 3rd and 5th? And what were the other dates?
The other date would be, sorry, I just did it, the 26th and 29th.
Okay, wait.
It's a Tuesday.
26th and
Fri-
28th,
Okay,
pardon me.
that's, okay.
I think it works for me.
Seems right.
I'll move those.
What were those May dates again?
The
26th and 28th, and the 3rd and the 5th of May.
Oh, the 3rd and the 5th of May?
Yeah. Lori will send us invites, I'm sure.
Yeah. I'm sure I'll be fine. I don't see anything coming up during that time. Okay. Are there any other things that you want us to, that have to do with our calendar, anything like that?
I updated the work calendar. I just don't have it for you tonight. I worked on it for a while.
Okay. But you'll get it over to us. Okay.
All right, anything else for the good of the order? Jenny, anything else?
Sorry, I just muted myself. No, I don't have anything else.
All right, then we will go ahead and adjourn. Thank you, everyone.
Night.